everybody, it's freaking August. What the how? This is my July book haul and wrap up. I said in June's wrap up that I really wanted to have a good reading month. I did, yay! So the first book that I read this month was The Goddess of Buttercups and Daisies by Martin Miller. It was weird. It's set in ancient Athens. They've been at war with Sparta for 10 years and the majority of people in Athens are just fed up. They just want it over and done with. So there is this massive peace conference going on, but at the same time there is this small group of people who want the war to continue. They are trying to basically scupper the peace talks. And in order to do that, they summon the goddess Leia. She comes to Athens and she is the bringer of bad decisions. So anyone who kind of passes her, they basically make the complete opposite decision that they should do. And it causes chaos in Athens. All things start to go wrong, including this peace conference. So the goddess Athena, who is desperate for this war to end, sends her own convoy to kind of stop Leia and to keep the peace conference progressing perfectly. And it all revolves around this play that Aristophanes is writing for the City Dionysia festival called Peace. And it's about, it basically becomes about that play and making sure that that play is a success. So there's a lot going on. There are a lot of characters in this book and it's written from the point of view of so many different characters. Pretty much every single page in this book is written from the point of view of a different character to the last page. You have to keep up with it. It's jumping around all over the place. There were parts of this I liked. I actually studied classical theatre and classical history in school, and the City Dionysia Festival, which is kind of the focus of this book, I studied that and I found it quite interesting to read about that from that point of view, and I think that's probably why I was able to get through the book. I enjoyed it more because it was about that festival. If that hadn't have been there, I probably wouldn't have done so much, because I couldn't really get into it. I felt very detached from the story. I think because there were so many points of view, it felt just a bit disjointed at times. I think it was kind of meant to be written in a similar style to like the classic comedy plays that were written at that time. So there's loads of coincidences of people bumping into each other. There's obviously all these gods and goddesses getting involved, and there's also this whole subplot about flaccid stage penises. Yep, that's a very important plot line in this book. It's just a very strange book. I finished it, gave it 2.5 stars, but yeah. Also this month, as well as just reading a lot, I wanted to tackle my NetGalley approval to feedback ratio. The first book I read from NetGalley was The Heartbeat Thief by A.J. Crafton. It was set in Regency England initially anyway, and it's about this young woman who, she's very pretty and she's just come of age, she's just come out to society and everyone's, you know, wanting to marry her, sell her off, etc. And she just becomes very disenchanted with this whole thing until she meets this guy, this mysterious dark stranger, and she discovers that he has the ability to make her immortal because she becomes terrified of death. Lots of people around her die and she just becomes absolutely petrified by it, and she meets this guy who can give her immortality. So she becomes immortal, except in order to remain immortal and, you know, survive, she has to steal heartbeats of people that she meets. And it's basically about her life. The initial kind of description for this sounded like it was going to be very kind of, she meets this dark handsome stranger and they become, you know, fall into this sort of sexual relationship. That's what it sounded like. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it. As it wasn't like that at all, and I was really glad because there was a lot of story to this, there was a lot of plot. I gave it 3 stars, and the reason I only gave it 3 stars was because I did feel that it dragged on a little too long. There were too many kind of individual stories about things that happened in her life, and I felt like it could have been, you know, 50 pages at least shorter. But I did overall actually quite enjoy it. It was decent enough, it was quite well written, and I did enjoy it. So I would recommend reading it if that sounds like your kind of thing. The next book I got from NetGalley was Raw Blood by Catriona Ward, and this was about the most gothic book I have ever read. Pretty much every trope, every general idea that is associated with the gothic genre This book had it. It's got the creepy old house, it's got the moors, it's got a sort of ghostly woman, it's got scientists doing kind of creepy ass experiments in the basement. Everything you could imagine in a gothic book, this book has it. I gave it 3 to 3.5 stars overall, but I did feel like the writing deserved more because it was incredibly well written. It's one of those books that is, you can tell that the author has planned everything out in such detail beforehand because it was so well structured. You know, everything comes around. It's really cleverly written, really well written, and I enjoyed it from that point of view, and I would have given it 4.5 stars for the writing alone. But the story itself, there were sections of it where it dragged a little bit and that I found them not as enjoyable. There's a lot of kind of back history that has to be explained, and certain elements of that I found just were a bit dull and didn't really fit in with the gothic theme. But if you like gothic fiction, you need to read this book because it is so gothic-y. It's incredibly well written, and if you like gothic fiction, you'll probably really love this book. Next up, I read The Wicked and the Divine, Volume 1, The Faust Act by Kieran Gillen, Jamie McKelvey and Matthew Wilson. I loved this so much. I gave it like 4.5 stars. I really absolutely just freaking fell in love with it, and I cannot wait to read the next part. For those of you who don't know, this is about a series of gods which are reincarnated as rock stars. It specifically follows this young girl who becomes, you know, intertwined with their world, and it's not as great as it seems. I thought the characters were really well written as far as a graphic novel was concerned. They were just really interesting, and particularly Lucifer's character in this, and that character was incredibly well written. I really love that character. The art is amazing. I mentioned this in my graphic novel haul, which I will link to here, where I go on about it, and there are pictures and everything so you can look at the art. But it's gorgeous, it's really gorgeous, and I did really love it. I really recommend checking it out. Next up, another NetGalley. I read The Dream Engine by Sean Platt and Johnny B. Truant. I was honestly quite disappointed with this book. It's basically about this young woman who lives in a world where things are created through this machine which is connected to people, and it's all about how they manifest these objects in their mind and they become real. It's a clever concept, but it wasn't incredibly clear how it all worked. But anyway, it's about this girl who is one of these people who manifests these objects and works in the ministry for manifestation. But one day she discovers that there is another world under the world that she lives in, and everything changes. The interesting thing about this book is that it was written in a month. Basically, they had this idea, they were going to conceive the idea, write it and publish it and create the artwork and everything within 1 month. And I think that's what lets it down, to be honest. The writing just feels very rushed at times, and there are certain elements of this book which I just didn't understand very well because I felt like they hadn't taken the time to explain it. I feel like even though the story and the idea was really clever, it needed more time for them to work out, you know, for them to write it, basically. I just don't think that concept really worked for this story. I think the story was too complex to write it and publish it and everything in 30 days. It needed longer time for them really to flesh it out. I do admire them for doing that and attempting that, but I do feel like this story was just too complex for that. So overall, clever idea, but just not right for this concept. The next book I read was Thor Volume 1, The Goddess of Thunder by Jason Aaron, Russell Dauterman and Jorge Molina. I loved it. I loved every second of it. It's so well written, and I love it particularly because it just continues the same way as the previous comics of Thor, you know, when he's the god of thunder. It just continues with the same storylines, everything goes on, it's the same, it's just that she happens to be a woman, and yeah, they do reference that because it's new and it's like, what the frick is going on? But it's so good, and she is really funny. I love her internal monologue. It's really interesting and amusing, and there are some great scenes in here. There's particularly one scene which I won't spoil, but it basically is referring to all the people who were doubters about whether it was a good idea to do this, to make a Goddess of Thunder. I really, really loved it, and if you like female superheroes, then you really should check this out, because I think it's really interesting and clever, and yeah, I loved it. So finally we get onto the books that I read for TBR Takedown last week. I did take part in TBR Takedown. You wouldn't have known it from my booktube channel because I never actually uploaded any videos about it. I intended to do a TBR video for the start of the week and things got in the way, never got around to doing it, but I did write a blog which I will link in the description below, so you can go check that out to find out what I was going to read for it. My TBR Takedown was sort of moderately successful. I finished 2 books and nearly finished a third, and I started 4 books overall. The first book I read and finished was Detour to Apocalypse, a Rot Rod serial Part 1 by MacLeod. I got this from NetGalley again, and this was my book for the challenge of read a book which is entirely outside your comfort zone. This book couldn't have been more outside my comfort zone. It was about the reason I got it from NetGalley was because the synopsis started with the line, Roscoe is a hot rods riding zombie, and it was just like, okay, this is a book set in the 50s with a zombie who drives cars and fights evil, and I was just so incredibly intrigued by that I had to read it. There was a reason it was entirely outside my comfort zone. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it at all. Thankfully it was very short, it was only about 60-70 pages, but yeah, it wasn't good. I gave it 2 stars, which honestly I think was quite generous because I didn't enjoy it. However, my biggest grievance with this book was, aside from the fact that it wasn't my kind of thing and I didn't think it was that well written, my biggest grievance was that it had particular use of racist language in it, and there was absolutely no need for it. And this is a note for all authors. Just because you're writing a book that is set in an era where language like that was acceptable doesn't mean that you have to use it in your book. This particular case really bugged me because there was absolutely no reason whatsoever for it to be included. You know, they didn't talk about it, they didn't acknowledge it, it was just slipped in there like it was a entirely casual thing. And you know what, I'm fed up of the historical accuracy argument. That's a load of bullshit. It's 2015, you don't have to use that language. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So yeah, I didn't enjoy the book, it wasn't my kind of thing, but one of the particular reasons why I only gave it 2 stars was because of that use of language. It really bugged the hell out of me. Nope, just don't do it. It's 2015, stop. The next book I read and finished for TBR Takedown was Pride and Prejudice, the graphic novel by Lawrence Sack. Again, along with Thor and Wicked and Divine, I mentioned this in my graphic novel haul. You can click here to see that. I didn't know what to expect from this. I saw it and thought, okay, I have to read that because I love Pride and Prejudice and it just intrigues me enough, and the fact that there is a graphic novel, I was like, yes, this is fantastic. But it was so disappointing. It was so disappointing. The thing that let this book down specifically was that it didn't include nearly enough of Austen's original language. The script was terrible. It was awful. They put all this kind of internal feelings thing in there, and so there were all sorts of thought bubbles, and they were excruciatingly bad. I gave this 2.5 stars, and the reason I gave it that was because there was the odd occasion where they used Austen's original language and it was fine. I enjoyed those parts. It was really cool to read a graphic novel with Jane Austen's original text in it. That was really cool. But that was a tiny portion of the book, and there should have been so much more of her text in this, and it would have been so much better. As it was, the script was terrible, it was so simplified, it was awful. The artwork was mixed. The kind of landscapes, the drawings and paintings of the buildings and the settings and everything, they were beautifully done, and I really liked those. They were really clever and really cool, and I just really thought they were fantastic. But the character drawings were pretty bad. There were several occasions where I was looking at it and I couldn't work out which character was which. So yeah, I was incredibly disappointed in this. I hoped for so much more, and I really hope someone else does another version of this that's better, because it could be so cool and so good if they did a decent graphic novel of Pride and Prejudice, but this isn't it. The next book was the book that really screwed me as far as TBR Takedown was concerned. For the first book in a series, I chose 12 Kings of Sharakai by Bradley Bolu. I loved this book. I haven't finished it yet. I really, really am loving it. It's so good, and Cheda, who is the lead character, is incredibly interesting. It's about this city in the middle of a desert where it's ruled by these 12 kings who everyone hates basically because they're awful and horrible, and it's about this character called Cheda, and there's all sorts of there are these horrible creatures that kill people, and I can't really describe it, but it's so good. I'm really enjoying it. Like, it's really well written, and Cheda is a fantastic character. Fiction has really been missing a character like Cheda. She's fantastic. I'm loving this book so much. The reason it screwed me for TBR Takedown is because it's 600 pages long. I didn't realise this until about the third or fourth day, and I was reading this book, and I'd been reading it for a good couple of hours, and I was only about 10% in or 20% in or something, and I was just like, I'm never gonna finish this book before the end of the week, let alone read the other books that I still have yet to read. So it wasn't the best book to pick for a readathon, but I'm really loving it, and yeah, it's really good, and I'm really interested to see where it goes. So I didn't finish that book. I kind of put it aside because I resigned myself to the fact that I wasn't going to finish them that week, and instead I picked up Sabriel by Garth Nix. This book I picked for the challenge, a book that you've had on your bookshelf for the longest, or at least a year. This book I've had on my bookshelf for about 13-14 years. Quite a long time, and I am enjoying it. It's interesting because I keep getting to bits and thinking, oh, what would like the 11-year-old, 12-year-old me have thought of this if I'd actually read it when I got it. For those of you who haven't read it, it's been out for like decades now, so most people have, but for those of you who haven't read it, it's about Sabriel, who is the daughter of basically a guy who stops the dead from rising up, in a way. That's the simplest way I can put it, and her father goes missing in some sense, and she basically has to go on this adventure into the Old Kingdom, which is where she lived but where she doesn't live now, and there's all sorts of dead and magic and creepy stuff going on. She has to go for this adventure through this kingdom to find her father. That's essentially the simplest way of describing it. A whole lot more to it, but yeah, that's the simplest way of describing it. I'm nearly finished this. It's really easy to read, and I am enjoying it. I wouldn't say I'm loving it. I think I maybe expected to love it more than I am, but I'm enjoying it. But yeah, I'm glad I'm finally getting around to reading it because it's been on my bookshelf for so long. One other book that I started but didn't finish in July was Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. Steelheart is sci-fi, and it's not the kind of genre that I normally read, but I'm really enjoying it. It's incredibly well written, and yeah. I haven't got very far with that yet, I'm only like 10% in. So those are all the books that I read and or started to read in July. I have a couple of other books that I hauled but haven't started or read yet. Firstly, I got Fated by Benedict Jacker. This is, again, it's another world where it's like a dystopian London and there's magic and all sorts of stuff going on. Honestly, I really love the cover of this. It's really pretty. I haven't read it yet, so I can't talk about it very much. I also got sent The Assassin's Curse and The Pirate's Wish by Cassandra Rose Clarke by Ashley over at Faithfully Moonstruck. I won her giveaway of these, so thank you, Ashley. I'm really excited to read these. And also on NetGalley, I got sent Sorcerer to the Crown by Zen Cho on ebook form, which I'm really excited to read. It's another fantasy, and yeah, I'm in such a fantasy kick at the moment. It's great. But those are all the books I hauled and read and started to read in July. That is my wrap up. Let me know if you've read any of those books, what you thought of them, or any of the books that I haven't read yet, what you thought of them. And yeah, that is it for me today. I will see you again soon, but until then, bye.